You've heard me say it once, and you're going to hear me say it 1,000 times. Browning is flavor. Browning and caramelization are so important when it comes to flavor. Caramelization, which is what we're going to be learning today, is particularly important because what it does is it takes the carbohydrates or sugars in a food and browns them down and makes them really sweet and much more complex. We're going to practice on onions because onions are surprisingly high in sugar, and a lot of people are surprised to find this out because they don't really taste sweet, right? They hurt your eyes, that's not a sweet thing. But all oleums contain a lot of sugar, which actually makes them really easy to burn in the pan. And this includes garlic, onions, shallots, leeks, and everything in that family. Because they burn so easily, we're going to cook these long and slow. Like by cooking them at a low heat for a long time, what happens is very slowly those sugars are spit out of the onions and they react to the heat and they start to caramelize and stick to the pan. And that sticking is flavor. Sticking is flavor too. Browning and sticking are pretty much the same thing and they both equal flavor. So the low and slow approach is important because if we were to cook these really quickly, they wouldn't caramelize. They would just cook and get really soft. Instead, cooking them low and slow, we're going to cook them down to almost a jam texture. They're going to get really soft, they're going to get really brown, and they're going to get really sweet. You're going to be able to smell like this complex browning sweetness. They're going to smell amazing. Now, one important factor when caramelizing onions is not to salt them. If you salt a vegetable while you're cooking it, it actually pulls out all the moisture because salt is hygroscopic, right? So what it does is it pulls out the moisture and then you end up with a bunch of extra moisture in the pan, and instead of cooking, instead of caramelizing, your onions will steam. And they'll get really soggy really fast, which is not what we want. When it comes to how you cut your onion before caramelizing, that's totally up to you. I like to cut mine into slices like this, or rather half slices. You can see I cut the onion in half and then I just slice them so that they're kind of long. And this way when they're done, like you have these more like threads in your caramelized onions, but you can also chop them down into like dice and then caramelize them that way. A really good way to go about that actually, which is much more versatile, is to cut them like this and then you can chop them up after they've been caramelized. The cool thing about caramelized onions is they actually hang out in the fridge for quite a while. I do have to warn you though, if you leave them really long, like if you were to like use a huge onion or slice the onion so these were whole circles, they're kind of awkward to caramelize. They take up a lot of space in the pan, and then when you do use them like after they've been cooked, they end up just kind of long and stringy and they can be a little awkward to eat. So while I've cut these into a half onion shape, like I cut the onion in half and then I slice the onion so I get these half rounds, another favorite way I have to chop them is to cut the onion in quarters and then cut and slice them up, and then you get little slices that are about that big right there. The best thing about caramelized onions is you can put them on anything. Anything savory, right? I've put them on top of soup, they're great. I've put them on burgers. You can mix them into a salad. You can stir them into a vinaigrette. Like really, the uses are endless. If you want to keep them for a long time, you can just put them in a fridge in a little sealed container and they'll keep for a couple weeks.